Hello everyone, and welcome to the third ever episode of the Internally Screening podcast. I'm Rupert.
I'm Adam.
And the first thing we're going to talk about today, before we get to films that actually are out, that we're going to review and discuss, we're going to talk about the very favourite thing of film people on the internet. Really, all you need to know about to be qualified on the subject of film these days. You know, it's superhero films, and two pretty serious announcements came out, and some kind of funny drama surrounding them, because it was the for those not in the know, it was the DC EU FanDome, which is basically just I guess it's their version of just like DC's E3, you know, where they just look at all of the intellectual property we own, that we don't want to let go of. These are the films we're making, so we don't have to let go of it. And so the one that you're probably most likely to have heard of is the trailer for the new Batman film starring Robert Pattinson, directed by Matt Reeves. What did you think of the trailer, Adam?
Well, I mean, I'm glad we've got it because, you know, with the whole lockdown situation, I'd had heard that it was one of the films that was sort of like nearing completion, that they had to. It's
still not finished.
Shut. Oh, they haven't finished. The
trailer. What's amazing to me about the trailer is the fact that it's most. You know, they've shot. I don't know what percentage of the film, but there's still a huge amount of it that's not done yet.
Okay, so they still haven't. Okay, that makes sense. But I am cautiously optimistic about this film, mostly based on my recent appreciation of Robert Pattinson, because obviously lots of people still associate him with Twilight, even though in recent years he's made a lot of effort to distance himself from that with some really great films. Good Times, The Lighthouse, and he's about to star in Tenet as well.
High Life was pretty cool.
Oh, High Life was interesting. Yeah, so you know he's starring in some arty things. So like him as like this sort of like edgy, dark Batman, knowing how he's capable of such range, is exciting. But some of the visuals, it kind of still gives me I worry about the fact that it's affiliated with the DC universe, you know, because it does have such a track record, and it does kind of whiff a bit of the current, you know, DC model. I don't know.
It does. I would say the trailer is very, very dark. It's a little murky. I hope maybe just like, I don't know, turn the brightness setting up a little bit. It does look really dark. I agree with you though. I think Robert Pattinson is like a really promising prospect as Batman, because the people who, there's a small, I don't know how much of a section of the fan base this is, but there's definitely naysayers who like aren't over Twilight, and I just think like, you know, get the fuck over it. He's an actor and he's done a film early in his career which would obviously, you know, him doing Twilight, you know, as cringe as those films are, I mean, I haven't seen them, I don't know, I assume they're pretty cringe, I assume they're pretty terrible, I assume he's pretty bad in them, but you know, I think it's really, really, really stupid to hold it against him to this extent. To a point where I know some fans are, where they're saying, "Oh, we can't have sparkly vampire man as Batman. He's not going to be a real Batman." It's like, are you joking? These are people who haven't, you know, they don't. I mean, maybe they just haven't seen, you know, The Lighthouse or Good Time.
Well, yeah, I mean, those are kind of more obscure films, I guess. Like, you know, as you know,
it still feels unfair to me because.
I agree, but as like movie snobs, you know, when, for instance, you know, when like Uncut Gems came out, you know, by the same directors, the Safdies, as Good Time, people started calling it like an Adam Sandler film, as though he himself had made it and had veered violently from like Grown Ups 2 sequels or whatever to like, oh yeah, I just decided to make Uncut Gems. So people really do associate they don't have like that broad of a scope on movies like we do, I guess.
It's just depressing to me how like short memoried these people are, because I mean, you have to remember that when Heath Ledger was cast as the Joker, and when Ben Affleck was cast as Batman, people were like up in arms.
And when Michael Keaton was cast as Batman,
and Michael Keaton, who is going to be in the new Flash film. That's a side point.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, that is weird. But like, you know, these people who are criticising Robert Pattinson, they love Ben Affleck. These are probably a lot of sort of Snyder Cut type people.
Yeah.
And, I mean, you remember when Ben Affleck got cast as Batman?
Well, I was quite excited for that because it was.
No, so was I. But like, I thought, people were angry about it.
Well, I suppose I was excited off the back of Gone Girl because I had no interest in Ben Affleck whatsoever. Saw Gone Girl and was like, oh shit, this guy's actually a great actor. Like, how have I never watched anything from this guy, or barely anything at least?
Yeah.
But with regards to the rest of the trailer, I think the thing that's keeping me most excited outside of Robert Pattinson is the rest of the cast as well. It seems pretty expertly cast for the large part because you've got Jeffrey Wright. That's his name,
He's
right?
great. Jeffrey Wright,
the guy from Westworld,
Royale.
and he's a great like support character.
He has an amazing voice for like announcing dramatic things because it's very husky. And that's basically Commissioner Gordon's thing in Batman is to announce the plot points as they come.
Yeah.
The Joker he wanted me to lock him up in the MCU or whatever he says in The Dark Knight. Like that's the whole purpose of Commissioner Gordon, so he's brilliantly cast.
Yeah. And then you've got Paul Dano, who's not in the trailer because he's going to be the big bad. Is he in the trailer? I don't remember. I just watched it, and I don't think he's actually.
I think he's the guy. No, I think he's the guy with the mask at the beginning.
Oh, okay, right.
I could be wrong.
You don't see the reveal of him as like the Riddler in his full costume or anything. But again, that's a brilliant piece of casting because Paul Dano is a kind of uniquely slimy looking individual. Like, he's a great actor, and it's kind of unfortunate, but he has like one of the most punchable faces in all of Hollywood.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
I don't know what it is about him.
He is a great actor, though, and that is a genius piece of casting. I agree. I don't know how much we're even going to see of him because the whole thing of the Riddler is he's like elusive, right?
I mean, I hope they're trailers. There's going to be like 4 more trailers before the end, and I really hope they kind of hold their punches with like revealing too much about like the Riddler and everything because it would be such like a very much a spoiler if everyone goes in knowing exactly what to expect from it. Like, I think it'd be really cool if they just held back a little bit, but who knows.
Since you mentioned punches, what did you think of kind of like the mic drop moment in the trailer, which is essentially Batman beating a young man into a coma?
That was fucking. I enjoyed it. I could see they were really trying with that moment to to like, okay, this is the tone of the film. This is what we're going for.
I don't mind the dark tone. I know some people are kind of sick of it, but I don't think the DCEU and its like numerous failures from Man of Steel to Justice League hasn't soured me on the idea of like dark superhero.
Oh no, not at all. But I mean, they all borrowed the dark aspect from Nolan's Batman trilogy in the first
I think that's
place.
what it's shooting for more, like the Nolan aesthetic.
Well, if anything, I would say the way that scene goes is them trying to say this is even more dark than that. This is even grittier than what you've seen. Like, oh, you've never seen a Batman film this violent.
Did you get Seven vibes from it?
Now you say it, kind of Fincher vibes in general. Yeah, that's a good shout.
And it would be. I think it would be cool if it's like a mystery film because I feel like all of the Batman films we've seen, from the Tim Burton ones to, the most recent ones, they've all ostensibly been action films.
Yeah.
So maybe it would be cool to see them take, mix up the genre a bit, make it maybe like primarily like a detective. Obviously, it's got to have action if it's going to sell to a mainstream audience, but I think it would be cool to see it like maybe divert a little bit and mix it up. If it's like got Batman doing detective-y stuff,
I think
like a primary focus of the film, I think that'd be awesome.
And I think that's something that fans have been like desperate for ages. I mean, whenever you go on comment sections of Batman related things, obviously you always get arguments about who is the best, who's the worst, and whatever. And one consistent thing is people criticize the Nolan films for having very little in the way of investigation. I mean, that criticism is not necessarily warranted across the board, but it's more the atmosphere of the film rather than the content of the film, because he does plenty of investigating, but it's like the film is building to the next action set piece, whereas a film built around detective work would feel, like you say, like more of a mystery, more of like a thriller, like where you don't know what's going to happen next. Like with The Dark Knight, you knew there was going to be some mad action bit just around the corner. That's what you were doing your investigation to get to. So and the Riddler is the perfect character to do a more investigative type story, isn't he? Because
I guess it just remains to be seen if Paul Dano can top Jim Carrey. I guess it's the big question on everyone's minds.
Oh, absolutely.
Before we move on, I would just like to say also that Matt Reeves is directing it, and while I haven't been like head over heels for any of his films, he did the God, what are they called? He did the Rise of the Planet of the Apes. No, I can't remember. Was it Dawn of the Planet of the Apes first or Rise of the Planet of the Apes? Because he didn't do the first one.
I think Dawn was the first one.
He did the second two. Okay, so he did Rise of the Planet of the Apes and he did War of the Planet of the Apes, which were pretty good and had at least some very good moments, even if overall I wasn't like.
They were pretty acclaimed. I've actually not seen any of those of that trilogy. So
yeah, he's quite a good director, and I think he's got like. I mean, I can't really say he's got potential because he's already made a bunch of very successful films, but I think he could potentially come out with like a really good film. I think all the ingredients are there. Yeah, exactly.
It's like like again, I come back to Robert Pattinson. He is such a talented actor, and I'm looking forward for his sake for people to, if this is a good film and he comes across well in it, then people will finally start thinking of him for this film rather than his past in previous franchises. We'll say. Well,
yeah, exactly. We can hopefully move past. Hopefully, all the 30-year-old nerds can get over the fact that Twilight was once a thing. I wouldn't put any bets on it. And then, so the other big announcement trailer that released was the Snyder Cut, the fabled, mysterious Snyder Cut, which I mean, I guess I'll just say, the trailer kind of confirmed my suspicion that it's probably just going to be mostly the same film with some extra CGI bits that they've managed to frantically piece together since announcing it, and some deleted scenes.
Yeah, it definitely reeks of the Batman v Superman extended cut type deal where they were like, oh, don't worry, this extra half hour we've got of deleted scenes and shit, this is going to fix the movie entirely. And it absolutely doesn't. It just bulks it out, makes it more tedious than it was before. I
think it might be better. I think that's a possibility. I'm open to the possibility. I'm not saying
it won't be better necessarily. Whether it's like measurably better though, you know what I mean? Like if it's like from a 4 out of 10 to a 7 out of 10, is a very different thing from like a 4 to like a 4.5. Do you know what I mean? It's like we've done it. We've increased it fractionally.
If you want to talk about measurably better, I'm pretty sure it's been confirmed. It's much longer than the original. So, in terms of like, if it's even close to the quality of the original Justice League, you could probably measure my suffering by like each minute that I have to watch of it. So if it really does end up being like fucking 5 hours long, because it's going to be like an HBO. It's going to be like an HBO series because they're doing it to compete with. The Mandalorian, apparently.
You're kidding. They're not going to serialize it, are they?
Yeah, it's going to be like an episodic release. I don't think it's going to be... it's going to be one film, but I think they're releasing it episodically on HBO.
You're kidding. Is that real? I didn't...
Yeah.
Nah.
What? The other thing that caught my attention, apart from the fact that with the terrible song choice, it completely seemed like... If you put that in front of me before I knew it was legit, if you showed that to me, I'd be like, that's a fan-made trailer. With the Hallelujah.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, you know what? So yeah, they to people who haven't seen the trailer, they play Hallelujah over it, which is like a desperate
the Leonard Cohen version.
Yeah, which is a desperate cliche at this point. Like you could, there are so many movies and trailers or pieces of media that use that song to evoke that same dramatic effect. And
it's like a guy playing Wonderwall at a party.
Yeah, it's so tired and overused. I mean, it's a great piece of music. I get why it's a classic in that sense, but it's just such a cliche at this point. And also, that it kind of gives this sense of like, oh, hallelujah, we've got the Snyder Cut. It's here. The film you've been beckoning for. It's like, yeah. It's like, it's so self-congratulatory. Do you know what I mean? It's like, well, hallelujah for the Snyder Cut.
Well, I've read, now this is gonna sound kind of sad at first, but I just want to say something after it. So, I've heard the reason hallelujah is used is because it was like a favourite piece of music of Zack Snyder's daughter who died. But my question then is, you're telling me that Zack Snyder then used Hallelujah in Watchmen, as two characters have frantic, kinky sex after going out and beating up some criminals?
Right, yeah. That's a very good point.
Is that true? I don't think that's true. And the only other one thing that really bugged me about the trailer that I just want clarified, it's in like a fucking, like a 1 point something critical what's it called, aspect ratio.
Right.
It's in like a really weird, like with the sides chopped off aspect ratio. Is the film gonna look like that? Is it not going to be widescreen?
Oh, maybe.
Is it going to look like the fucking Lighthouse? Like, what the fuck?
Yeah, I hadn't thought of that. I guess the one thing that's going to be measurably different from the theatrical cut is that he will almost certainly have removed every single shitty Joss Whedon gag that was in there.
I do wonder how much damage that's going to retrieve. Because in my head, I'm thinking it won't. But like the worst bits of Justice League I remember in my head are like the really awkward, quippy humour scenes that just reeked of Joss Whedon. And essentially the film is going to be the same with some extra bits attached, and it's a different colour. So.
Yes,
it's that, but I say that like in a blasé way, but that could be quite major. Like that could be like a huge.
Well, there was that one scene that we noticed going from the trailers, the original trailers to the theatrical cut. There was the night and day switch of when they revive Superman.
Yeah.
And in the original Snyder Cut and in the trailer, you can see it's going to be all in the dark, right? And then in the Whedon version, he brightens it up and kind of adds a slight comical element to it. It lightens the whole scene, which I thought worked, actually. I thought that scene kind of, I thought Whedon did an all right job with that. I'd be interested to see how Snyder changes that, but I reckon even changing the time of day, like you say, could have like quite a major effect on how that scene feels, even if you change nothing else.
I think the problem is at its core. I mean, I think we did discuss this in our first episode, but so I won't harp on it. But at its core, it was already compromised. So even the footage, the sacred footage that Zack Snyder shot, that got cruelly grasped away by Warner Brothers and put into the hands of a cultural Luddite like Joss Whedon, before that happened, he was already on thin ice with Warner Brothers, because Man of Steel was disappointing in terms of commercial box office. Didn't do terribly, but didn't do well. Batman vs Superman was like a little bit of a disaster for having not hit 1 billion.
Yes.
For a film with the two most famous superheroes in it at like a peak of superhero renaissance, and just a film at a time where the Guardians of the Galaxy films are doing 800 million.
Exactly.
It did not much more than that.
Yeah.
So he was already on thin ice with the studio. So much of what he shot would have been at the studio's behest and wouldn't have been his original vision, because we know what his original vision was. It was like Batman vs Superman. So the studio was already pressuring him to course correct. So this idea that like you're going to get this pure,
he would have to film the
vision.
whole film again, really, wouldn't he?
Yes, yeah.
He'd have to write the whole film again, or it would be a case of starting from scratch. And as we've already discussed, that's impossible given that actors' contracts have finished. Especially right now that you wouldn't be able to film anything major anyway. There's no way that
a bunch of the actors left the roles.
Exactly. There's no way that the studios are gonna pump the money in for that kind of expense. So it's already a compromised vision. And I honestly can't see it being much better than it already was. And it's a Zack Snyder DC film? Like, have we forgotten? I know that the people asking for it were all loyalists anyway.
They've reevaluated all that stuff. Batman vs Superman. Batman vs Superman in some corners of the internet is now seen as like this masterpiece, but it's like, oh, you have to watch the Ultimate Edition, where it's like, right. Yeah, they added
the bloated version,
like the journalist plot line that got cut,
right?
So the film's just longer and more boring.
Yeah. Yeah,
it's still bad.
Like,
they're still bad films.
He made two messes of DC films, and then there was this one kind of hokey mishmash of his style and you know, Joss Whedon's Avengers, and then everyone was up in arms like they were missing out on some glorious finale to his trilogy. Like, nah, fuck that. Like, everyone with the right thinking brain knew that those films were fucking garbage. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Speaking of Zack Snyder and you know, some, not to put it in a sort of headline way, toxic attitudes. The funniest part of this whole thing for me, because I didn't think the Justice League trailer, the Snyder Cut trailer, I don't think it's that interesting. Ultimately, no. It's not very. There's nothing there.
It's
really.
Quite bland, really. Yeah.
The best part of all of this was Scott Mendelson, who is I believe he's a Forbes critic, tweeted. So that trailer for the Snyder Cut of Justice League looks like the same movie, lots of deleted scenes from the marketing campaign, but otherwise it looks like alternative takes of existing scenes, which seems like a completely fair and accurate statement. And also it's just a guy's opinion. So Zack Snyder, in his ultimate wisdom, decided to quote tweet this, must have struck a nerve, I guess, and said, "You said you enjoyed the theatrical cut of Justice League like you enjoy your Saturday morning cartoons. Well, this is made for grown-ups, so you're not in the demographic. Also, cool of you to comment on a leaked teaser." Okay, number one, on the final comment, he's a journalist, so it's his job to comment on leaked stuff.
Was it a leak? Was he commenting on a trailer?
Like, it came out like a day before or something.
Oh, okay.
It came, or something. I don't know. But journalists still cover leaks. Like,
right. Well, and journalists have early by the by, it's like, it is his job to comment on shit.
If something gets leaked, it's news. So
yeah, absolutely.
But also, just like it reads like the Rick and Morty copy pasta of you need a high IQ to understand the Snyder Cut. It's just like, and the idea that, like, Zack Snyder, I don't know him. I'm sure he's a really nice guy. I respect him a lot as a director because he's got a really strong visual style, and you know, his films do feel like, I know when I'm watching a Zack Snyder film. Right, if I sit down and you put a Zack Snyder film on, I haven't seen it, I'll be able to tell you, oh, this is Zack Snyder within 5 minutes. I do respect him, even if I don't really enjoy most of his films. Like, why would you do something like this? It's such horrible optics. Yeah,
it does make you look like a total idiot and like a bit of a whiny, like. People who can't take criticism well on the internet just come off looking really bad.
Especially like that, where it's like, this is for grown-ups, so you're not the demographic.
Yeah.
That's like the Navy SEAL copy pasta, like,
that's like some playground
you're dead,
shit.
Kiddo.
It is. It's literally like one of the most childish insults you could possibly give to someone. Like, you're a baby, you wouldn't understand. Like, oh, fucking hell. Sorry, I didn't realise Justice League was this fucking high art. I didn't realise I was watching a fucking space odyssey. Like, it's fucking Superman punching a big alien in the fucking head. That's the fucking film.
It's not Tarkovsky. Like,
exactly.
Relax.
All you've done is take out some of the stupid jokes. And make it darker. Like,
they were always kid films as well, right? I'm pretty sure they've all been PG-13. I don't know, was Batman vs Superman? I'm pretty sure it was PG-13.
I don't know. I mean, his original vision wouldn't have been. Do you know what I mean?
If I had kids, I wouldn't be upset if they watched Man of Steel or, you know, Batman vs Superman. I'd be like, fine, you know, as long as I knew they were okay with the violence, you know. I wouldn't. They're not very extreme. So my message is, if it's really not for grown-ups, make it actually violent then.
Also,
because they seem like they're for kids. All of the Zack Snyder films for DC have been for kids, ostensibly.
I mean, that's going to be very contentious with the fan base, but
it is.
It is. No, but and also, like, why the films look so plastic and fake with all the weird rubbery CGI he uses. Like, if he doesn't want it to be compared to cartoons, then like maybe ease up on like the cheesy graphics. because they all do look kind of like hokey. They don't look like the CGI they use in like the Marvel movies. And yes, I'm gonna get slammed just for making that comparison, but
you're in big trouble now, mate.
I know, but like they don't I don't know. To me, the Marvel use of all that stuff just seems way more I don't know, tasteful and like less plastic.
Well, it kind of fits the. Well, I mean, like the thing the Marvel films do right, even though there is some pretty terrible CGI in the Marvel films as well. They're not
like the end of Black Panther or something.
Yeah, like there's lots of bad CGI in those films, but like they're not taking themselves super seriously all the time. So some like cartoony visuals don't take me out of it. But when I'm watching Man of Steel and Henry Cavill's up on the screen looking like Jesus spread out, and the music is like this like choir and just like Inception horns, and everything's grey, and they're all talking in fucking, you know, philosophical language about how they're going to punch each other in the face. It's still just a kids film. You just made it more boring. Like, at least the MCU films know what they are, which is just a product for people to consume.
Yeah.
Which, you know, people use as a criticism against them, but I guess it's valid in a way. They are very, very commercial and safe, but at least it's like, you know, if a Big Mac isn't successful for no reason. It tastes good and it's easy. It's not something that just got slapped together. They put a lot of thought into that stuff to make it really consumable and fun for people. Whereas Zack Snyder pursuing his vision is all well and good, but I don't think it's really suited to this like huge epic Hollywood franchise building.
Thinking about it, a great counterpoint for that is within DC's own filmography, they have a film that kind of fits that. Style.
There are,
and it's called Aquaman, and it's amazing fun. It's not like one of the best films I've ever seen, but it's like one of the. It's like my favourite guilty pleasure of the last few years. Like, I fucking adore that film.
It is the greatest film ever made,
and it kind of fits a lot of the DC.
Yeah, and that film made $1 billion. Yeah, that's how you know you fucked up. Because when fucking Batman and Superman can't crack $1 billion. But
Aquaman can. Yes, exactly that.
The franchise that was literally, or not even franchise, the IP that was literally laughing stock.
Yeah. And everyone was like, nah, the Aquaman film's going to flop and crash and burn because of the failings of these films.
Aquaman proved me wrong, man. I was one of those people.
Yeah, I saw that first trailer. I was like, this could go either way. This could either be the most hilarious film I've ever seen or total garbage.
And when I saw Aquaman, everyone clapped. It was a beautiful... No, but it was a beautiful... you know, everyone clapped. There were tears in my eyes.
For a moment, I thought that would genuinely happen. Just like everyone was so emotional about Aquaman. Okay, so the first film we're going to talk about properly is the new streaming film Palm Springs on Hulu, starring Andy Samberg, who we first grew to love through The Lonely Island, through which the company have actually produced this film. But he also famous for Brooklyn Nine-Nine. Also starring Kristen Milioti, who some people might know as the mother from How I Met Your Mother. This is a far more favourable role than that, in my opinion. And sort of story-wise, it kind of, you know, broadly follows the Groundhog Day type narrative, where they're stuck in a time loop. Only this time around, there seems to be kind of like a less metaphorical existence of the time loop, as someone else is able to be dragged through with him, and hilarity ensues where they both together are stuck in a time loop, and they have to find their way out. And on the way, they have a few laughs, and maybe they fall in love.
Spoilers, mate.
I mean,
that's the Palm Springs was the friends we made along the way. that is basically the film, isn't it?
That is, yeah. I haven't given away anything you wouldn't have got from the trailer, so
yeah.
I'm good. I'm all clear.
I think, in terms of quality, this is like a very nice film. Yes. It's like, it's a neat enough spin. So Groundhog Day, like, even though it's like a kind of comedy, dark comedy, it's almost like a horror film in execution, because watching it, I'm always like horrified by the concept
Yes.
Whereas
Yeah,
this is
very...
much more. This is much more like easygoing. It's kind of like a slacker rom-com film.
Yeah, I'll go with that. Before we, decided to settle on this film, we were sort of watching around, or I was watching around trailers, and this one definitely caught my eye. I love Groundhog Day, so as soon as I saw the concept, because the name doesn't really contain that, so I was shocked when I saw the trailer. I thought this sounds incredibly exciting. I love Andy Samberg because in spite of me pretending to be like in spite of me pretending to be a big film buff, I do love normie shit like Brooklyn Nine-Nine. And it's nice to see him in like a proper film that doesn't look like total garbage, like fucking That's My Boy or whatever other shit. I mean, he was, he's been in other like Lonely Island type films, but they've always historically done pretty badly at the box office. Like, people don't care about them.
He's been in a lot of flops.
And obviously, like, hearing of this film, the first thing I heard was that it was already getting quite a lot of, acclaim and success. Apparently, it's broken Hulu streaming records in terms of amount of hours watched. Because let's be fair, like, especially in the UK, I guess in America it's a bigger thing, but like, who really watches Hulu as their like go-to streaming service?
I think it's huge in America, but
it is big in America.
We're not allowed. We're not allowed Hulu.
But like, Netflix is still the king, and even Amazon Prime is like, Hulu is definitely third place, if that. So breaking Hulu streaming records doesn't necessarily mean a whole bunch, but it's cool that the film is seeing success anyway. But my first impressions of the film, after being excited by the trailer, I have to say, I found the film to be kind of lukewarm. Like you say, it was nice, it was pleasant, but it wasn't. I thought I was going to be like gripped on like a thrill ride, like I was with Groundhog Day, and perhaps that comparison set me up for a bit of disappointment. But
there was no point where I was bored, where like a lot of like these American comedies will lose me as I'll get bored because I'm not finding anything funny. But this had to me like a good enough balance of, I'm intrigued by the characters, I like the characters enough to like keep watching, and it was funny enough. There was like no point where I like outright laughed. So like, in terms of a comedy, that's going to be an issue.
The humor wasn't brilliant.
Because the problem is, you can't watch this and not think, oh, it's like a reboot of Groundhog Day, basically.
Right. Yeah.
It does differentiate itself in like plenty of ways. It's not a complete rip-off, but like Groundhog Day, there's so many like, gut-bustingly hilarious moments, which I still laugh at when I watch that film.
Yeah.
Whereas this, it's like a lot of sort of,
yeah, it's pleasant in everything. It's not particularly gripping as a comedy, but it's also like very okay as a comedy. It's not. I don't find anything like horribly unfunny about it, which is often a problem I have with American comedies, where I'm like, oh, for fuck's sake, just get on with it. Like everything felt quite natural. Andy Samberg is like just in general a very charismatic actor. He's not particularly brilliant as like a dramatic actor, but he kind of just plays himself here, apart from being a bit more like, I don't know, depressed and a bit like more mopey because he's stuck in this time loop. But
I actually thought he did pretty well here. There was no point where like I felt like there was a scene that was too. And this film, has some sort of sad moments, and there was no scene where I thought, wow, he's out of his depth here. So I was quite impressed with his.
I would contradict you on that, only because to me, a lot of the moments where he's when he's trying to be more emotional and connect with Kristen Milioti, they felt very note for note. That there's plenty of scenes like that in Brooklyn Nine-Nine, because like Brooklyn Nine-Nine, because it's like a normie show, they always have to have like some kind of like moral ending where it's like, oh, as a character, I learned it's bad to treat your friends badly or something like that. Right. It's always really wet, but it's like okay, whatever. The show's been funny up to this point, so I'll allow it. But every time he has to emotionally, reconcile with someone, it's always delivered in the exact same way that he does here, and it felt like a bit TV acting, if you know what I mean. Like,
I see. I've never gotten into Brooklyn Nine-Nine, so I don't know. That just wasn't an issue for me. I think the biggest issue in terms of complaints is that like I thought the film was very thematically standard in that it's basically just Andy Samberg's. I don't know if this is spoilers. I guess I'm spoiling.
Okay, yeah, we'll go into spoilers
spoilerish stuff here, but in terms of his arc, it's like he's a nihilist and he thinks life has no meaning, and this is pretty much stated outright in the dialogue where he says, you know, why bother about anything? Just like keep going and live in the loop. Yeah. And then she's more of like an existentialist where she's like, no, life has inherent meaning and we need to make the best of it. And obviously she's in the right. So her arc is realising what she needs to do to escape the time loop, and his arc is realising that he should escape the time loop because life has inherent meaning, which is fine, but like in terms of, it doesn't stick with me particularly. It doesn't really investigate it very deep, and I particularly didn't like the whole thing where she like becomes like a quantum physics expert. Right.
So yeah, as the film progresses,
that seemed ridiculous to me.
So okay, so going full spoilers, they discover early on, or rather, she discovers early on, he's been living in it from the beginning of the film. He has been living through it for years at this point, and she discovers this kind of scientific anomaly where, like, in a cave near this holiday resort they're staying at, this for a wedding, there's I don't know what it is, like a portal, I guess, like a wormhole, and the wormhole takes them back, and that's what loops them. Once they go through the wormhole once, they're doomed to keep going through that day. So rather than it being like Groundhog Day, where it's kind of grounded in this kind of metaphor of like, here's a really curmudgeonly, difficult human being who needs to learn the error of his ways to become a better person. It's almost kind of like A Wonderful Life type story where, you know, it's almost like a divine intervention into his life, where it's like he is taught a lesson. This film kind of strips that moral message out of the film, which I instantly kind of, you know, didn't like. I as soon as I found it was like, oh, they're going to have to crack this scientifically to get out, it kind of lost me a bit.
It could have. I mean, I could see that concept working. It didn't really seem to suit the characters because it's such a left turn for her character. Right. I mean, she's smart. Don't get me wrong, but like, it's such a left. Like, her character is like clearly supposed to be maybe more intelligent than Andy Samberg's character, who's kind of portrayed as, he's like a bit of a doofus, but he's like, you know, got a heart of gold type. Yeah. But the I could see a film where a time loop thing like that works. Because you've got characters who are involved in science somehow. I mean, the closest time-related film like that I could think of off the top of my head would be like Primer. Which is a very, very different film to this. And
it's not a film I've seen, comparison. But no, because that's one where they're actually building a time machine.
And it's. I can't really say anything about it, mostly because I don't have a fucking clue what happened in that film. Because it's really confusing. But there's. The theory of loops is in that film as well, but it makes sense in that film because the characters are literally scientists and they're trying to make something, and they kind of haphazardly accidentally make a time machine. That's the concept of the film. Whereas in this, we have two people at a wedding, young people who you know, they're like having like an early midlife crisis, I guess. Yes. And then they happen to. So I understand why they did it, because obviously they wanted Andy Samberg to have already been in the loop, and then her to join him after he spent years and years and years and years in the loop. Yeah. And I guess the easiest way for them to do that was to just have like a literal wormhole cave. Yeah. I mean, there are elements of it that work for me, because like I found all of the stuff with J.K. Simmons quite funny.
Yeah, because another character that gets pulled into the wormhole.
Yeah. So like the first time, the reason Andy Samberg's in this predicament is because he was having like a drug bender with J.K. Simmons, and they went into the cave.
I think,
isn't that it?
No, well, that does happen, but I think Andy Samberg had already been in the time loop already.
Oh, right.
And it was on one of his loops. He decides to go on a drug bender, do a bunch of cocaine, and then whilst he's high, he's like, "I've got a great idea. You should come into the time loop with me." And J.K. Simmons becomes horribly.
Do they ever resolve J.K. Simmons? Because they escape. What happens to him?
They do. I don't know if you saw it. It's kind of like, I don't know if it's post credits. I think it's like a mid post credit roll or something. He turns up at the end. He's like, "Oh yeah, I got a call from your girlfriend. She said she had a theory about it." And then Andy Samberg doesn't recognize him, and he's like, "Holy fuck, you solved it!" And then he kind of laughs to himself, and then the film ends.
Oh, okay. I missed that.
I mean, it's you were done.
I mean, look, I feel like I'm being harsh on it. I think the film's quite good. It's like there's, in terms of like directing and writing, there's nothing very flashy going on, which is fine, you know, because it's kind of serving its purpose, and it doesn't need to be. Not every comedy needs to be directed like an Edgar Wright film. I get it. It did feel, you know, maybe a little bit flat, but I thought it had enough cute moments. I thought him and I forget the lady's name, and I don't think I can pronounce it anyways. Yeah, I thought they had great chemistry together, and like some of the like character reveals of like how much of like a fuck up she is and how much of a fuck up he is.
Yeah, that was cool.
Yeah, their chemistry together was really nice. And like I did, the humor that clicked with me most was like the kind of absurdist stuff where it's like he talks about all of the stuff that he's done in the loop.
Right. Yeah. Where he's like shagged everyone at the party and tried to fuck the bride and stuff like that. That's quite funny.
It does kind of miss. It doesn't have anything as like hilariously like morbid as the Bill Murray suicide montage.
Sequence. They kind of dip their toe into it where she like tries to get out of it by crashing the truck.
I do like how he says, "Oh, just make sure you crash it properly because you don't want to be stuck in the ICU. That's horrible."
Yeah.
I thought that was kind of amusing.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, that's the whole thing.
And it colours the world as well. It like adds little details that establish like, you know, the rules and boundaries of what they're going through.
It didn't have anything as good as in Groundhog Day where he like learns the day and all the timings.
Oh,
the best part of that film is him like nailing all the timings, and you have that like how he like slowly like just gets better and better and better at like knowing the day. It didn't have anything like that. Like it has elements of it, but like it just feels like I kind of get that they didn't want to harp on it, but I don't know. If, either you got to come up with a more different concept, or you've got to do the same concept just well. I don't know.
I tell you what, this film was halfway to being a really great film, I think. And I think in that, I think the first half of the film is it's an intriguing setup, like two well-written characters who have good chemistry, sympathetic and interesting, and like you say, different enough where you can kind of you sympathise with both of them, but you know who's in the right and who you really should be rooting for and all that. Interesting rules, interesting backstories, and you know, interesting gags of like him, what he's gone through in all his years stuck there. And then as soon as you hit like a midway point, or like the point where their relationship starts to kind of fall apart, for me that's where the film runs out of its interesting ideas, and it just kind of it goes into like autopilot where it's like, right, now we need to finish the film. Now it made it
very apparent how clear it was kind of coasting on the stars having good chemistry. Because like, while I thought it was an interesting story progression, I was like, well, I kind of want them to just be hanging out again.
Yeah, exactly. That's all I kind of wanted, because that was where, and that also where all the comedy was. I know we were saying the comedy wasn't very, I don't know, gripping or particularly, you know, detailed or interesting, but it's
not laugh out loud, but it's good.
But it was sweet and charming, and the comedy does kind of just stop at one point, and doesn't really resume until the film is resolved. And like we were saying earlier, her character being a scientist, becoming a scientist over the course of however long, for me, that led me to an issue with the ending of the film, where, okay, I understand she's being pragmatic about things, and she's like, I need to get out of this situation. How do I do it? Oh, there's a scientific anomaly. I need to learn about science. But in order to do that, she must have had to spend, however many thousands of hours and days.
Well, they say like it's 10,000 hours to master a craft, right? So
yeah,
however many days that is.
Right. So in that time, those two characters are apart, and all Andy Samberg's character is doing is just sitting at the pool feeling sorry for himself.
He does like try and look for her.
He does a bit, but from what we can understand, from what we gain as the audience, he just kind of starts feeling sorry for himself for like, I don't know, a decade, and then she feels sorry for herself. She becomes a scientist over the course of like a decade, and then they're still like deeply in love with each other by the time they reunite, and they still want to do it together and stuff like that. It's like, for me, it just I lost that sense of believability. Like, I know that it's a ridiculous premise, but the core of it is a very believable love story, and for me, the love story lost its believability as, at that moment where it's like, right, I'm supposed to believe these characters that haven't seen each other for years and years and years.
It did feel very rushed,
and it's also the way the film portrays it in this kind of, very
holding hands, walking into the fire.
Yeah, no, I meant the bit before that where it's like the montage of just her like working shit out.
No, I get what you mean.
It's just like, it blitzes through like a bunch of important shit, and then at the end, like you say, they just like, they kiss and make up instantly, and there's no like real tension. The film could easily have been half an hour longer, and I'd have probably preferred it if they'd have fleshed that out.
Yeah,
done something
maybe
more.
it would have been better longer. Like,
it's the perfect. I can see
why
it's.
I can see why it's been so successful, because like, obviously, it's kind of escapist but relatable, because obviously everyone's stuck inside, so I feel like I'm in a time loop a little bit, just like sat doing work on my laptop.
That's actually that's an interesting point.
So maybe that's why people are kind of like gravitating towards it, and it seems to have gotten a good amount of hype. It's got very good reviews. I don't know if it's going to be something people remember though.
No, I don't know.
Because it's the kind of thing I could imagine sitting, a group of friends or my family around and everyone enjoying it. But I don't know if this is the kind of thing people are going to be talking about.
Yeah, it's like a nice sort of summer afternoon film. When it's perfect that it came out at this time as well. Like it fits the vibe very, very nicely, and like you say, it just kind of it will drift, I reckon.
I don't know if I'd ever watch it again, but like as an experience overall, as much as I've been whinging, I still think it was decent overall, and I'd give it like a 6 out of 10.
No, I'd go with that. Yeah, a 6 out of 10 is a fair rating. Yeah,
it's like it's closer to the 5 than the 7, but
I just think that it was like a few clever writing decisions, story decisions away from being like a really memorable, inventive film that stands. And for all our comparisons to Groundhog Day, whilst it does kind of take that template, it is very different. It does stand on its own, I think. All it needed was a few more of the clever sort of ideas that Groundhog Day had, to go that extra mile and really make it something that people will remember going forward.
Well, like as a first-time director and writer duo, I think these guys definitely have potential.
That's a good point. Yeah.
I'd watch what they do next.
Absolutely.
So I feel like it's definitely, even though I'm not head over heels for it, I enjoyed it enough to where I'll watch what they do next. I think it was, I agree, lots of potential, but ultimately, the final product was just sort of nice.
And I hope Andy Samberg gets some more good gigs in the future off the back of this,
Oh, yeah.
Maybe people will start realising his movie potential. We'll see.
I hope so. So the next film we're going to talk about, I recommended from last episode to Adam, who hadn't seen it before. The film is The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, which is an adaptation of Stieg Larsson's very, very popular, very influential crime thriller book, which was originally titled in Swedish "The Men Who Hate Women," but then got changed to "The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo" for marketing reasons, I imagine.
Yeah.
And was then adapted by David Fincher, who everybody knows, every film nerd worships, one of the best directors of all time, into technically a remake of the Swedish adaptation film version of this novel. So a very popular story, being taken slightly out of its cultural context, which, as a really snobbish film person, to put it lightly, would be the kind of thing that I feel like I would be, principally against. Like an American remake of a foreign film. Historically not a great track record with that concept. But lo and behold, this is kind of the exception to that rule, because having read the book, having seen the original Swedish film, to me this is like the definitive way to experience this story. I'll go more into it, but what did you think of it, Adam? I know you like David Fincher.
Yeah, I do. Fincher was always the first director that I kind of clicked with. I went, oh, I like this director's style. I don't know, when I was back in university, like normally I would just watch a film and be like, oh yeah, it's a good film, but this was the first director I like latched onto after watching like Seven and Gone Girl and stuff like that. So yeah, this was one that passed me by. I think kind of passed me by for the same reasons you pointed out. Like, I was suspicious of it as like an American remake of something. Like, I was familiar with it as like a Swedish thing. I was like, nah, I bet it's shit, because at the time I didn't realise who'd made it. But this is fantastic. Honestly, I think one thing that struck me right out of the gate was, in spite of it being an American remake, it still manages to feel very Scandinavian. It holds this sort of icy, northern sort of darkness to it. That it's very grey and kind of oppressive, but like, I don't know, in the way that a lot of Scandinavian dramas are. Like, if you ever seen like TV shows like The Killing and The Bridge and things like that, like they all have this kind of grey coldness and seriousness to it, and Fincher pulled that off brilliantly, because it still does have his like hallmarks on it, but it's not so over the top as something like Seven or Fight Club. It's not so garish. It's more refined and restrained, and that kind of fits the Swedish source material very well. Beyond that, it's a wonderfully cast film. Like, everyone in it has so much gravitas. Daniel Craig is a wonderfully sympathetic and like intriguing protagonist, as is Rooney Mara, who goes through some pretty awful things in the film, as the film is likely,
and doesn't look anything like the Rooney Mara you might know.
Yeah, quite. I guess the stuff that happens to her character was kind of what a lot of people might know the film for. It's certainly what those sort of infamous scenes were what I knew of it before going into it. And then even the support cast are fantastic. You got Stellan Skarsgård is amazing. Christopher Plummer. It's just a wonderful thriller. Really excellently written. I can totally see why the books were so successful. I've never read them myself.
What I'd say is, the reason I'd say this is actually better than the book, which I know is going to be completely sacrilegious just in concept. The reason this is better than the book is, so the guy who wrote it, Stieg Larsson, was quite an interesting guy. He was a journalist, like a left-wing journalist.
Okay.
So Mikael Blomkvist, the character Daniel Craig plays, is basically just a character insert for him.
Oh, okay.
So if you watch it in that way, it's kind of like a guy. In a way, it's like a very kind of anti-feminist idea. This idea of like an author self-inserting and basically creating his ideal woman,
right?
For him to hook up with eventually. But what amazing, I mean, maybe I'm not in the position to say this, as a man, but to me, like, the source material even though it's a very well written book, it's still got that kind of sleazy paperback vibe to it, and the film like somehow manages to capture the kind of pulpy nature of the material, because there's some cheesy stuff that happens, sure, but there's some really kind of dark and disturbing stuff that happens as well, and there's certainly cliches here and there, but what the film manages to do is take a lot of the potentially unsavory and maybe not particularly progressive ideas in the book, and kind of make it like the film feels like every scene that's supposed to be dark and disturbing actually feels really, really kind of grim and disturbing. It doesn't feel sensationalized or over dramatic or anything.
No,
like it just kind of captures that essence, and more importantly, to me anyways, the book has like very long diatribes of particularly surrounding like the Wennerstrom affair in the film and all that kind of stuff, has lots of long sort of very journalisty type investigative details that really add nothing and just kind of pad out the book, and this kind of cuts all of that out, and I think this film does like a really, really good job of streamlining kind of a difficult, not massively difficult, but at least a challenging thing to adapt into film, and does it pretty well. I mean, there's like a montage in this film of someone doing research in a library, and it's still really exciting.
It's because it feels like it's building towards something. There's like a real urgency to everything that's happening at that point.
He's just got such a good grasp on film language that like you can watch, and it kind of relates back to David Fincher's history as like a music video director in a way. Like you're just watching Rooney Mara on a laptop, reading documents, looking stuff up, and I can follow. There's like, without any dialogue, I can follow what's going on, and it's like
that's
making
very
sense.
Yeah,
and I don't think just anyone could pull that off.
No,
it's a real task to have done that, and the film is just like immaculately directed.
Absolutely. I was going to mention the most David Fincher opening ever, where he does like a weird industrial version of like a Led Zeppelin song over like it's like a weird bastardized version of like a Bond intro, where it's just like everything's covered in like ink and like oil or whatever. It's
especially with Daniel Craig, that's a good comparison.
Yeah. In fact, you know what? As we were watching the film, we kind of made like comparisons between Daniel Craig's Bond and this character. Like this was like a university graduate version of James Bond, where he hadn't quite gotten his womanizing ways yet.
Before he got scouted by the MI6.
Exactly.
It's funny you bring that up. So if you've read the other books in the series, so the original series, the Millennium Trilogy, is a trilogy of books, obviously, but it's really kind of heartbreaking to watch that opening sequence now, because if you're familiar with the books, there's basically a lot of imagery. Well, there's a lot of imagery in the opening credit sequence, which if you're paying attention and know the film already, you can pick out scenes from the film. So, for example, there's like a 1 second shot of a guy underwater, which is a reference to, I guess, spoiler, Harriet killing her father,
yes,
and knocking him into the water, and there's a bunch of other stuff like that. And if you watch the credits, the opening credits sequence, there's a lot of imagery from the other books, from the films they were going to make, because this was supposed to be like an adult R-rated trilogy of films, which is completely fucking galling to me that we're now never going to get.
Well, yeah, that is an interesting thing. I guess kind of skimming around the bulk of the story, which we'll come back to, the ending of the film does very much seem to be an epilogue that is sort of building the groundwork for future stories. So it's not just a thing like, oh, it's a shame they didn't do the other books. It very literally ends off where it should pick up with the next film. And I don't know if you know anything about it. I haven't looked into any reasons why this franchise didn't continue, if everyone on board seemed to be, under the impression it was carrying on.
Well, I think it's owned by Sony, and And there's quite a good video on YouTube you can look up. The guy who does lessons from a screenplay. He kind of briefly mentions this. But basically, this was in 2011. This was given to David Fincher, and there's footage in the video where David Fincher says, "Oh, they want me to do an adult R-rated trilogy. Like, this is what I've been waiting to hear since I've started directing."
Oh damn!
He wanted to do it, and then 2011 was when Avengers came out. And this film did respectably. I think it was 90 million as a budget, so fairly modest, on the upper end of modest.
Yeah.
Made about 200 and something million, so a decent turnover, but I don't know how heavily marketed it was.
Yeah, not exceptional.
I don't know if it
I suppose.
didn't do exceptional, but probably turned a profit.
That's not too bad. That's not bad.
Yeah. 200 and something, I think maybe 260 something. Yeah, it did well enough, like most David Fincher films do, but basically the Avengers came out, that did $1 billion, so the idea got dropped. They didn't want to sink more money into it, which is gutting to me, because from what I've read, the cast were all keen to do it. Rooney Mara's still wants to do it, even though she's obviously far too old for it now, and they've already done a failed reboot of this series.
Now, you know what? They transform her look so much in it that they could easily just fucking do it anyway.
Yeah,
you know what? If you just went all right, had a little disclaimer before it, look, it took over a decade to get this sequel done. Everyone looks too old, deal with it, and then that was just your little...
Daniel Craig would be the real issue.
Oh god,
I mean,
he's such a craggy-faced old man now.
He's so old now.
This decade hit him like a ton of bricks.
Oh, it really has. I mean, he looks old in this, but now he looks old. But you could. I mean, I won't spoil anything about the second story, but you could potentially. It wouldn't be difficult to write it so that it was set a way bit off, past the original. You could do it.
Yeah,
it's a real shame they didn't. I mean, speaking of the cast, I just wanted to. Yeah, you said the film was expertly cast, and I agree so much, because Daniel Craig has always been a little bit underrated for his actual acting ability.
I totally agree.
Because, his performance in Casino Royale is amazing. Not just amazing as for a Bond film, straight up a brilliant performance. People are giving him a bit of respect now that he's done Knives Out and Logan Lucky, and he's doing the funny accents. But he's always been great, and I think even though it's very understated, it kind of reminds me of Clive Owen in Children of Men. That very kind of, it's a lot of show not tell acting, where he just kind of embodies a character by not going massively out of his range like he kind of does in Knives Out.
Yeah,
I'm way more impressed by the kind of understated.
It's
really
restrained,
honest.
but it feels it's a very good sort of character reflection kind of character. Where the character isn't so garish and over the top. Like Rooney Mara's character is, where you can't relate that strongly. Whereas with Daniel Craig's depiction, he is, charismatic enough for you to care and enjoy his character, his presence, but he's ordinary enough for us to feel like we are in his shoes and that we are facing the perils that he faces. I think
he's the author insert and he's the audience insert.
Yes, exactly that.
He plays a brilliant fish out of water.
Yes, 100%. And you know what? Speaking of being fish out of water, that's interesting in terms of the fact that he is the only character in the film that, he is one of few characters in the film that doesn't have a Swedish accent, which we largely speculate is due to the fact that he's not very good at accents. But even if that is the main reason for him not doing an accent, it still is an interesting little detail that he is kind of isolated again in that way, because you have you have Swedish actors actually I'm not sure, is Stellan Skarsgård Swedish? I
think he's Swedish.
He's certainly Scandinavian, so he can pull off
Norwegian.
The accent. Yeah,
I think he's Swedish though.
He can certainly pull off the accent regardless. Everyone does subtle accents. They're not hugely over the top fucking the Muppet Chef. Hurdy-gurdy, no one's going...
I'm really glad. Because if they asked Daniel Craig to do a Swedish accent, that would have been
it.
So I'm really glad they didn't do that.
Like you say, he's a fish out of water, and that kind of makes you relate to him more, because we are all fish out of water in this story.
Yeah, exactly. Because the whole thing is he's kind of. I think the island setting is genius for a number of reasons, but like, you know, for a start, you know, it makes you feel isolated. It makes the audience feel kind of like a fish out of water in the film, because you're like, God, there's this new piece of information. What is this character doing? There's something suspicious going on over here. And Daniel Craig is very good at sort of being in that bemused, like, what the fuck am I doing here?
Yeah. And all the information.
Like,
sorry, all the information you get is incredibly intriguing as well. Like you're. I mean, it is the job of any good thriller to do this, but you know, it's still commendable when one pulls it off. That every single bit of information you get in this film is like intriguing and like compelling, and it drags you further and further into the storyline. And it's interesting the choice of the film choice of the story to separate our two lead characters for like a significant chunk of the story, and have. Basically, almost Rooney Mara's Lisbeth
Salander.
Salander, yeah. To have Lisbeth's character backstory almost told during the opening part of Daniel Craig's main story, because that is kind of what's happening. Because whilst it's really important to her, and a lot of really horrible stuff happens in that backstory. It doesn't really affect anything that happens. I mean, it pays off in terms of what happens to her then, and what then later happens to Daniel Craig kind of mirrors one another. But her stuff has very little effect on his stuff at the time of the film. They kind of feel like two very different, opposing storylines, which is a very interesting way of telling a story. That's kind of unique.
Well, I was thinking about the structure of the film, because it's such a weirdly structured film, because it opens with all the Venestrom stuff, which is essentially the B plot of the film. And it opens with the B plot, and then then he goes to the island to be proposed the job by Christopher Plummer of investigating this murder mystery, and begins this. And as this storyline is running parallel to Lisbeth Salander, played by Rooney Mara, who her only connection to him is that she has investigated him for this job that he's doing, unaware. Daniel Craig being unaware of this, and it's almost like an hour into the film, maybe more, maybe less, where they actually meet, and it's a very weird structural choice to essentially. This is a to put it like, you know, crudely, it's kind of a buddy film in a way. Like a lot of the appeal of the film,
or like an odd couple type thing.
Yeah, it's like a weird matching of people having this kind of unique chemistry.
Just
together,
a very bleak Scandinavian way of doing it.
yeah, exactly. It's like the bleak Scandinavian version of Lethal Weapon,
or Starsky and Hutch, or some shit.
Yeah, or Starsky. yeah, exactly. But like, it's such a gamble by the film to make the audience wait that long.
Yeah,
without even saying, kind of. I mean, you kind of know that they're going to meet up eventually, but like, it does really make you wait, and it does pay off in a good way, because they do have great chemistry.
That patience is very indicative of David Fincher's style, isn't it? He doesn't rush you to any conclusions. He is perfectly happy with you just letting a scene go on as like long as it needs to.
I love that so much. Like but he knows how to like deliver information in such an interesting way, and like the best example of that to me, like the initial flashback setup narrated by Christopher Plummer, who for the short amount of time he's in this film is just brilliant.
Oh man, I was sad when like they announced at one point he goes into a coma, and I'm like, oh what, he's so fucking, the gravitas of that man is unbelievable.
He's essentially in like 3 or 4 scenes in the entire film, and he just like absolutely nails it. But yeah, the scene where he's delivering the montage of flashbacks with the voiceover, it's just like it as a setup. I mean, it could be so boring. We've all seen the like flashback story. The character tells a story and sits down, but the way it's done is just like so intriguing. And I love that like he does the color change because I guess the point of the colour change is like, it's his memory of it. So his last days with Harriet is all kind of bright and sunny. And then, you know, whenever it cuts back, it's quite cold and grey. And the way it's done, again, it's kind of like a music video. You could probably watch that whole bit and kind of get the mystery quite easily
100%.
without even having the excellent narration by Christopher Plummer.
Yeah.
And that's just, I don't know. Every time I watch it, I'm kind of like intrigued. I'm like, even though I know exactly what's happened, I'm like, what did happen to Harriet? What's going on here?
I guess, yeah, that's an interesting point. It's like David Fincher's very good at courting cliches, but then making them work and making them feel like they deserve that place and that they're not really cheesy and overbearing.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, he does like the flashback where there's like a weird sepia tone filter on it, and he's telling you a big like exposition dump. And in any other film, in most other films, you would criticize that and go, "Oh, that's a bit of lazy storytelling. That's like really tired and whatever." And yet somehow David Fincher has like an artful way of doing it where it's still very simple. It's not He's not complicated it by doing it particularly like weirdly or garishly or something.
It's hard to put my finger on what it is. It's like, I don't know if it's the acting, because like I can think in my head now, like the way Christopher Plummer like delivers certain lines just has like a real zing to it, where he's like, the accident had nothing to do with Harriet's disappearance, and yet everything. And
again, that line could be so cheesy in any other fucking film, right? But it's just like expertly directed. Like David Fincher knows what he's doing with his actors. Clearly, like I don't know if he is like hands on with actors on set, but that's the impression I get, because the performances are detailed, but like really, I don't know, like, you know, in avoiding those cliches, he's done like he must put in so much work. Do you know what I mean? I mean, Christopher Plummer's the kind of guy. Christopher Plummer's the kind of guy you could probably just point a camera at and get gold out of any day of the week. But
100%. I mean, David Fincher's a perfectionist. If you go onto YouTube, you can look up. He made for The Social Network. He made Andrew Garfield smash that laptop like 60 times or something to get a good take. And there's a story about Jake Gyllenhaal. There's a bit in Zodiac where apparently he chucks a book onto a car seat and apparently made him do it a bunch of times. I don't know if that's true, but there's certainly a level of perfectionism that comes through, because there's a real kind of, everything here feels polished. And I like what you said about cliches, because while this film it's a very cliche set up in a way, you know.
I mean, I feel like lots of thrillers in this way are like that. It's such.
This is a very influential thriller.
Oh, true, but like there is just a formula, and it's a formula that has been set for, you know, the better part of a century. You know, you could read what's his bloody name?
Agatha Christie.
Oh yeah, fuck it. Yeah, why not? Yeah, Agatha Christie. It's the same
or like
formula.
Sherlock Holmes books.
Yeah, exactly. These are stories that are basically being retold and retold throughout the ages, and it's about like the freshness of how you interpret them, that makes them compelling.
But I love that he sets up the cliches, but if you actually read into it, it's still crowd pleasing in the way that he's subverting your expectations, but he does it in a kind of crowd pleasing way where it's like, you know, the central mystery. So I guess spoilers for this. The central mystery is a girl goes missing on an island during a family meeting. What happened to her? She's been killed by one of the family members. No one's ever found the body, and we don't know who's done it. It sets up a kind of cliche, but they then end up solving a different mystery, and a series of killings in Sweden. And they don't find out until, you know, eventually they do, and, you know, she's still alive. And then, you know, there's subtler ones. So, like, you know, at the end, Daniel Craig is in a very perilous situation with Stellan Skarsgård about to essentially gut him with a hunting knife. And, you know, the Rooney Mara comes and saves him. So it's kind of like, that's almost like an inversion of the sort of damsel in distress cliche that you might have in a cheesier thriller. And then she says the classic, "Can I kill him?" And then she does.
That's excellent. I love that. He's like, the guns on the TV. Can I kill him? Yes. What does he say? Does he go? Does he say yes, or does he go?
He does. He goes, but he like barely, because he's been suffocated. He's
yes.
kind of like,
I love that. That's great. Again, that's like a great detail in the subtlety of Daniel Craig's performance. Like he's not a perfect bloke. He's not righteous or like particularly moral, but he's very human, like in that situation there'll be loads of films where it's like, no, don't kill him, you'll be just as bad as he is, and it's like, that's all well and good, but like he subverts the cliche by going, nah, just fucking kill the dude. Like, that's what we want to see. That's what we as the audience would be screaming at the fucking screen if that didn't happen. We'd be like, why are you not killing him? So
it's like, you can really tell this is written with a lot of kind of political passion behind it. There's like real meetings out of justice in this film. Not to the point where it feels ever particular. There's enough kind of moral ambiguity to how the characters behave that it never feels like just pulpy crowd pleasing or something. Like the I guess, to reference the rape scene, that happens and it's horrific. And whilst the revenge scene that she gets is, very satisfying to watch, because you're kind of like, yeah, fuck that guy.
Yeah.
At the same time, it's still not an easy scene to watch.
No,
it doesn't
still
shy
quite
away
horrifying,
from what she's doing. Because, I mean, obviously she's not as bad as the guy, but like the film doesn't, try and, it doesn't make any great.
It doesn't
effort
make her like heroic for doing it. It makes, if anything, it makes the scene.
But it makes you empathetic
horrifying
towards her.
Yeah, it
That's
does.
The whole
absolutely.
premise of it, right?
But it makes it like just as horrifying. Well, not just as, but similarly horrifying when it happens to him.
I've seen the films like so many times, and I still find that very difficult to watch.
Yeah, 100%.
In a good way.
Yeah. I get it. It doesn't. It definitely doesn't condone the actions of either individual, but it makes one really empathetic.
It's on one of their sides. It's on her side.
It kind of reminiscent of a lot of like the old, like revenge films, like and like more modern ones, like the Korean revenge films that me and you've been watching quite recently. There's that kind of dark vibe to that, and Tarantino, where like,
I could see this might have been influenced by that. This almost does have like a Korean revenge kind of quality to it.
There's that coldness to it that's similar to Korean films.
That like nihilistic anger. Although to be fair, I mean, I say nihilistic, I do feel like this film, even though it's like very sad, especially the ending is kind of heartbreaking, and it does have like a kind of, it's not completely nihilistic. I don't think I would enjoy it as much if this film was just pure pessimism.
Yeah.
Like, even though one of the core elements of the film is the family that Daniel Craig is investigating, and while the source material and the film takes like a very dim view of them, and I think the whole point of The Island is it's kind of sort of supposed to be a meta critique of Sweden as a whole, where you have like a very insular community with kind of festering attitudes of like fascism and hatred, misogyny, and also just like people who won't come back to it because they've been traumatized from this family system. I think it's supposed to be like a critique of
that
Swedish
makes a lot of
society
sense.
as a whole.
Yeah.
But like, it does still have heart. Like the scene where Henrik does Christopher Plummer gets reunited with Harriet is like a genuinely like really like touching moment.
Yeah, and it doesn't sully it by doing it doesn't try and cram like an extra twist in where he secretly hated her the whole time, or he's like, or she hates him and she like comes in and like, because I was fearful when watching that, like, oh, what are they going to do with this scene? Like, are they going to?
It gives you a lot of tension. It doesn't give you that release until they hug.
And they just play it straight. They just go, yeah, here's two characters that care about each other, reunited after decades, and it's heartwarming. Yeah.
Yeah, and Christopher Plummer, I mean, God, he's just so good in this film. He gets like, I don't know, maybe 15 minutes of screen time, and he's like my favourite part of the whole film. We haven't really spoken about Rooney Mara, but I don't want it to feel like she is like next level good in this.
She's excellent.
Like she is. She got her Oscar nom. There's just not. I don't really feel like there's anything more to say about how good she is in this, because like it is like a transformation role. Like she nailed it. She absolutely killed it, especially for like an American actress taking this role. I can imagine there was a lot of skepticism, and I hope this won some people over, because she does the accent to like a very non-intrusive amount. She's got the physicalities of it. I like her performance is really subtle, particularly I like in the last sort of portion of the film which is it's still kind of my least favorite part of the film. I guess we'll kind of get to that as like a criticism, but in the last portion of the film, there's like a really nice moment where she asks Daniel Craig to borrow some money.
Oh yeah.
And she says, "Oh, I need 50,000, but I'll pay you back in like a week or whatever." And he goes, "Really?" And she goes, "Yeah, I do need this quite a lot." And then he goes, "Sure." And then like if you like look at her reaction after that, it's not very showy, but like there's like emotional impact that has on her. Yeah, because her character's not very expressive generally, so it makes sense that
she's also just not used to like people being nice to her, and the fact that not only has he been like her lover, but then is also like a sympathetic person beyond that, like in a friendly way. She's never really had a friend, so to speak. You
can tell just by that look that like no one's trusted her to that extent before.
Exactly. Yeah. I guess I've sort of glossed over her character somewhat because we're sort of talking about the emotional weight of the film, and her character is kind of unique in the film in that she is quite emotionally closed off. Not to say she is emotionless, because obviously she goes through some
but she is quite
times.
Insular. That's like the whole thing.
Yeah, there's kind of speculation as to whether she's like like her backstory is that she's like kind of mentally unstable, and that she's been sectioned at some point or another.
She's a ward of the state.
Yeah, which must be the Swedish version of that.
Yeah, she's like she has like a carer, which is like kind of like the whole point of the film. But I think she's like maybe on the spectrum. Yeah, like maybe slightly autistic, but she's like very high functioning. I mean, she's kind of like a bunch of cliches rolled up into one. She's like a bisexual super hacker who is also really good at fighting, and she's like a high functioning savant autistic. But
she is kind of this. She is this film's Sherlock Holmes, really.
Yeah, but like it kind of works. Like when I say it like that, it does sound like a lot of cliche.
It does, yeah. Well, again, we keep coming back to that point. I hadn't thought of it whilst we were watching the film, but yeah, this film is really good at deconstructing cliches in like an interesting way.
But so if I'm going to come to my criticism, so I mentioned earlier that the film kind of starts on the B plot, so Daniel Craig being sued for libel. Just as a weird note, in the book he actually goes to prison for a brief period and then comes back. It's really weird, but yeah. Anyways, so the film is kind of constrained by being ultimately very, very faithful to the book and not adding really anything in, just taking stuff out that would fill up time. But it also has to adapt it quite faithfully. So the Wennerstrom thing towards the end of the film, where really Mara goes and sort of takes him down after he says, "Oh, we've won this. We've won this court case against Wennerstrom now, and I've reinstated my name, and I'm gonna get my money or whatever." But he probably won't meet justice, and then she goes off and she steals all of his money using her sort of espionage skills. It does feel a little bit rushed to me. I mean, it's done very well, again, in that kind of montagey David Fincher, mostly no dialogue, just showing her going around doing what she does in her disguise. Effective in that way, but does feel kind of like an afterthought in a way.
Yeah, I get that. I think particularly how the film kind of closes off as well. Like, I enjoyed that that montage, but yeah, like it doesn't really feel like it builds to a paramount. It feels like it's sort of giving momentum into the next film that never happened.
I really like the ending. I'm not quite sure how to interpret it, but I do actually like the final moment of the film.
What is that? The one where she sort of drives off?
She buys him the leather jacket. And I think this was some kind of like self-indictment by Stieg Larsson, because this is how the book ends as well. Daniel Craig is clearly a self-insert. He's a journalist with leaning towards the left probably. Stieg Larsson was a left-wing journalist. He's writing himself into the book pretty much. She realises she has feelings for him after he lends her the money and trusts her to do that stuff, and they have like this budding kind of romance going on beyond their like standard friendship. And then she comes to give him this present and sees him with the editor of his magazine,
Robin Wright's
going
character,
somewhere.
yeah.
Robin Wright's character, forget her name. her character name.
It's Robin Wright.
But Robin Wright, yeah. She sees him going off with her and thinks, oh, fuck this, and chucks it and drives off, and that's the end of the film.
Yeah.
And obviously it would have been better if we'd have just got the rest of the films. I don't think I'm ever going to get over the fact that we didn't get all of the films. Is the idea that Daniel Craig's character is like he's not a misogynist in the way that a lot of the men in the film are. Like, this film clearly is, maybe primarily an indictment of misogynistic attitudes. I mean, if the original title's anything to go by,
quite.
The men who hate women, that's clearly like it's at the forethought. It's a forethought of the author. So is it kind of like an indictment of himself that even though, Mikhail Blomkvist is a good guy, and has his heart in the right place and is a good person, for the most part, that he still maybe has some of those attitudes just kind of ingrained in him. I don't know. The ending feels like it kind of hits me with a lot of emotion, but I don't know what it means.
Yeah, because he had an affair early on. Like, he's having an affair with Robin Wright anyway, and then and then he's having like a double affair by sleeping with Elizabeth, because he's like having an affair with the person he's having an affair with. So like his heart is in the right place, and so I guess maybe it's a comment on like the imperfection of like the modern man. Like even people that are good at heart, that are willing to defend women, still have their own like kind of shitty behaviours,
hang-ups.
And yeah, exactly. It's a
That's
good point.
I
hadn't really examined that scene much before now, but yeah, it's an interesting one to think about.
Before we close off, I don't want to go without mentioning just one more great performance in this film, and that's what's his name, Skarsgård.
Stellan Skarsgård.
Stellan Skarsgård in this film is just wonderful.
Yes.
I love the final scene. I know we mentioned it briefly. The final scene where he has Daniel Craig strung up in his horrible torture dungeon is like his monologue where he's talking. It's like, again, it could be so cheesy, him explaining to his victim why he does what he does and all the murders he's committed before he kills him. And so many other things would just be so cheesy and like just boring.
Yeah.
But like the way it's done, I completely believe that this would be the kind of guy who would do that.
Yeah.
Who is probably himself kind of relishing in the cliche of it. Because he kind of says that he is, and he has a bunch of great lines in it where he's talking about like, oh, who is she? Just another girl, and you just kind of your skin is like crawling.
Yeah.
And there's just there's like just so many images from that sequence that just kind of stick in my mind. Like the scene where Daniel Craig he's there and he puts the gas to knock him out. He turns it on.
That's amazing.
And
That's
you just have
bit.
that. There's like this, but there's just like this second long shot of him with his mask over his face, and there's sort of shadows down on Stellan Skarsgård's face as he kind of moves towards him for like a second. And it's every time I see that, it still gives me goosebumps. It's like, it's such a horrifying scene, and then it has that like horrible cranking noise as he like wakes up and he's just kind of, Daniel Craig's kind of dragged into the air. Oh god, that whole bit is just such a great climax.
I think it's also like there's like a kind of there's a thoughtfulness to like the way they executed, the way they designed and wrote what happens in that scene. Like so often you just be like, the killer's got a fucking big machete and we're in like a dirty barn or basement or some shit, like something really plain and boring. And the fact that it's all kind of weirdly high tech and sterilized, like it's like the killing floor of like of an abattoir,
Well, you pointed out when we were watching it that there were power tools in the background.
Oh god, yeah. There's a whole wall full of like any power tool you could possibly imagine. Like that freaked me the fuck out. I was like, oh god, they're not gonna like drill his.
And there's no close up on it either. It's just like it's there.
It's just a detail. So, no, that's perfect.
Yeah,
that's like in horror films. I know it's a horror scene in of itself, but I love it in horror films where rather than having like some stupid jump scare where like the baddie goes boo, like they just have a shot where like maybe the camera pans over the protagonist, and then in the background, silent, there's like the danger, the threat, and because the threat is silent, it's so much more powerful because the tension remains. A jump scare.
It's the difference between a film noticing a threat and you yourself noticing a threat.
Exactly. To go on a very small tangent, I apologise, but a film that I rate that got mixed reviews, The Ritual with what's his face? I can't remember his fucking name.
It's directed by Rafe Spall.
Directed
by David Bruckner.
There's the way they show the monster in that. There's an amazing scene where he gets to like a clearing and he sees like a line of trees going in front of him, and then suddenly like a hand moves away from the tree, not into the tree, like so many films would do, where like a character like pokes its head round the corner or something.
Yeah.
Like the threat was there, and you didn't see it until it moved. That, honestly, is still one of my favourite horror things in recent memory. And I know it's like some shitty, like semi-comedic, like a lot of people didn't rate it, but I thought that film had like some really genuinely amazing horror in it, and it kind of reminded me of.
It just
like,
goes to show, yeah, like David Fincher just has that kind of language in his like in the way he shoots something.
I mean,
he can just chuck something in there like that, and it'll be so effective. But he's probably not even thinking about it.
He should do out and out horror straight up. Like I know he's done Seven and stuff like that, which is borderline.
Panic Room is like almost.
Yeah, he's good at doing horrifying thrillers, but he
because this has such a gothic industrial aesthetic. Like this is like this bit closer to being a horror film. I would love to see a David Fincher like proper like out and out horror. That would be awesome.
That'd be great. It'd be fantastic.
9 out of 10. It's like a 9.5. This is like this close to being a 10 for me.
I mean,
like,
yeah,
I want to give this a 10.
I agree with you. 9 out of 10. It's it made a hell of an impression on me. David Fincher has a way of doing that, but
he certainly fucking does.
Yeah, I was surprised and sort of in awe of everything this film threw at me, and yeah, I could see this becoming like a 10 out of 10 potentially. Its only clunkiness is kind of ending, really, where it feels like it kind of carries on beyond itself, and that's kind of almost not a fault of the film itself, but now that it stands
it's
on
also
its own,
like the core story does resolve very well.
Yeah,
so it's like the B plot that they end on is.
It kind of feels like it just kind of like goes on a bit long. Like you either resolve the Venestrom thing really quickly, or maybe you go, "Don't worry, we'll get that guy," and then the next film that's how it opens or something. Even though now, given that film would never have existed, it would have been even more unsatisfying to not see that. So it's a bit of a rock and a hard place situation with that. It's unfortunate.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, a hearty recommend to anyone that hasn't seen that. Who, if you've watched listened to this whole review, then you've definitely spotted the whole fucking film for yourself. But you know, that's your problem.
Also, multiple watches. There's a lot that you won't catch. Like before we, not to drag this out any longer, but for example, I was looking to see if you noticed this, but there's actually like so Stellan Skarsgård is the bad guy. When Daniel Craig first has dinner with him, you hear a sound in the background, which is sort of like a very, very faint scream, but it kind of sounds like wind going through like a window, like a draft.
Really?
A door that's like slightly open,
No.
and he gets up and he goes and shuts the door, and it's so subtle. It's
That's
so
sick.
subtle.
Oh my god!
And he mentions in his final monologue where he's about to kill Daniel Craig. He says, "Oh, when I was having dinner with you and my girlfriend, I had a prostitute down here who I was murdering. Who was she? Just another girl."
Yeah, that's sick. Oh man, I'm gonna have to watch that.
So there's
scene
reason
again
to
now.
rewatch it.
I'm literally going on YouTube and watching that shit immediately. That's such a great detail. Fucking hell.
And I've watched it. I only picked that up on like maybe my second or third watch. So you know, this film's got layers to it. Highly recommend it. Watch it again. Make someone else watch it. Probably don't watch it with your mum.
Maybe not.
Or or this I guess I guess a sort of reserved reservation in terms of don't watch this if you're sensitive to like gruesome violence, sexual violence, like murder, or anything. I mean, like
to be honest,
like
don't watch this if you don't like thrillers, because every good thriller has all of those things in it. Really, like, well, not necessarily sexual violence.
This has it to like an incredible extent, though. This is like, this is like a thriller on steroids in terms of what it will show you. You know, like this film does not shy away. It will point the camera at like some horrific shit.
Yeah, I can't think of many films nowadays that have 2 rape scenes in it. You know,
yeah, Jesus Christ,
a rape and a counter rape. But
God. Oh, all right. What are we watching next time, Adam?
Fuck. I still haven't thought. Okay. I don't know why. Not particularly tied to any other film that we've watched.
It doesn't have to be thematic.
It just came in my head. I was flicking through my Netflix the other day. I'm really intrigued by Francis Ford Coppola's Dracula.
Oh, interesting. I've seen that.
I remember you mentioning it to me maybe a year ago or something, and it popped up again, and I was just like, well, Gary Oldman...
Isn't it called... It's called like Bram Stoker's Dracula.
It's Bram Stoker's Dracula, yeah. And, you know...
There's a lot to discuss on that, you know.
Coppola, you know, after doing some classic work in the 70s, kind of did whatever for ages, and correct me if I'm wrong, but Bram Stoker's Dracula is a 90s film, right?
Yeah, 92.
Right, so God knows what he was doing.
I didn't know that off the top of my head, I was just looking at it.
Okay. But yeah, it's interesting that, like, you know, he kind of went kind of quiet for ages and then came up with like a weird gothic horror. So I don't know.
It's really weird, yeah. It was kind of like the dying age of like the big Hollywood directors getting ridiculous budgets for the craziest ideas.
For like whatever they wanted, yeah.
Yeah.
Because it's Gary Oldman as Dracula, isn't it?
It is, yeah. And it is it's wild. And
who else is
be
in
ready for... It's got Keanu Reeves, it's got Winona Ryder.
Nah, Keanu Reeves is in it.
And let me tell you, you are ready for one incredible English accent.
Oh boy,
my God.
Yeah, I'm ready.
He's putting us to shame. We've got real British accents, and his is still better than ours. Yeah. Well, I hope anyone, you know, as per usual, anyone who's made it to this point, you are a fucking trooper.
Thank
I hope you've enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Smash the like button. Smash subscribe. Ding that notification bell.
Oh God, I got you doing it now.
There I had to. I know. Well, I had to do it so you didn't do it.
Oh no.
That was out of spite.
Oh God, that felt really horrible being on the other end of that.
Yeah, it's not nice, is it, Adam?
It's really.
Anyways.
Oh God.
We've put you through enough suffering, particularly after that. Catch us on the next one when we'll be watching Bram Stoker's Dracula and something else.
Yeah, something.
God knows what.
Yeah. Something trash, probably. All right.
Something modern and horrible. Right. Peace out.
Cheers.